The fourth game of the 2022 NFL playoffs is the six-seeded San Francisco 49ers against the three-seeded Dallas Cowboys in Dallas. This game is on Sunday at 4:30 o'clock, and this is one of the more interesting games in my opinion. I feel like I've said that about all of them, but this game's going to be a good one. Um, if you're a Dallas fan, I'd be nervous. San Francisco is a very good team. They're coming off an impressive comeback win against the Rams, who are ranked higher than them in the playoffs. The Niners are 10-7, and if you look at the schedule, you really don't see seven losses there. They really got kind of the bad hand with the schedule. They really don't have too many like easier games. Just from looking at it, they've got a lot of tough games. Started the season off with the win against the Lions. They're like, okay, they only beat them by 8. Then win versus the Eagles, tough loss with the Packers. That's a game you're expected to lose. Seahawks early in the season thought they would be better than they ended up being. Then you play the Cardinals, play them close. Then you play the Colts, and at this point you're fairly under 500. But then a nice win against the Bears. Then the Cardinals again, you lose, and you're like, wow, you really got to get your season together here. And they come out and they blow out the Rams in Week 10. And then you take care of the Jaguars as expected, take care of the Vikings as expected. Tough loss again versus Seattle. That's just how divisional games go. And you beat the Bengals in overtime, handle the Falcons easily. Tough loss on a Thursday to the Titans, but then you take care of business against the Texans, and then you win and get in against the Rams. So they did what they had to do to get into the playoffs, and really their season's been more impressive than they thought it'd be. Like, you take care of the Rams twice, you lost to the Seahawks twice, and they weren't as good as we expected them to be. But we all know it's a talented team, and that can happen. Divisional games, divisional rivalries, stuff like that. But impressive to me is their overtime win against the Bengals. That was a game that I thought they'd lose personally, and the Bengals just it was a tough game. The 49ers, they have a really good run game. They played the Packers tight when they played them early in the season. I know it's early in the season, but they still play them tight. And then you take a look at Dallas and what they've done this season. They've had some impressive wins, and they've had some less impressive losses, I guess. They had a pretty bad loss against the Raiders on Thanksgiving. That was one we were expecting them to show out, and they just didn't at all. They had a huge overtime comeback win against the Patriots in that crazy game that we saw earlier, and they started the season off with that really tough loss against Tampa Bay. So, and Dak just threw 5 touchdowns in the game against the Eagles. So you look at these teams and you say, well, they both coming in on pretty good notes, and we know the Niners have been relatively consistent all year. They really haven't had too many bad games, like we know Dallas has had. Like that, Dallas has had that very bad game loss against the Broncos. And it's like, what team are we going to get? And are we going to get Jimmy Garoppolo with a thumb? How's his injuries going to be? What's his status? He had a nice comeback wins and made some nice throws, but we all know he wasn't as good as he could have been. So if he's 100% healthy and he's just a tad better, their offense is going to be a tad better. Kittle's going to get more catches, stuff like that. And what Dak are we going to get? What Cowboys offense are we going to get? We know the Cowboys defense is solid. We know Micah Parsons is an absolute stud. But what offense are we going to get? Is Dak going to throw for 5 touchdowns and 400 yards? Or is he going to throw for 100 yards and 2 picks and only 1 touchdown? Something like that. Like, that's the thing with Dak. His numbers are very impressive. If you look at him every year, they've been relatively good. But it always seems to be like he throws for 450 and 5 touchdowns one week, and then throws for 100, a pick, and a touchdown, like 2 picks and a touchdown the next week. So overall, his stats look like he's averaging 303 touchdowns, but week in and week out, that's not what he's putting up. He just puts up numbers that average out to be pretty good. I don't have a problem with the Cowboys' decision not to sit Dak at all. I thought it was good for him to just get out there and to kill the Eagles with the second team in, mostly for them. They had some injuries, they had some COVID issues, but they didn't. It didn't matter for them. They're going to be the 7th seed either way. But I'm fine with the decision. We'll see how Mike McCarthy goes as a coach. I'm not too big of a fan of him, but he's been in the playoffs before. I'm sure that'll help out just because the team is fairly young, especially Micah Parsons on the defense. Got to make sure he knows what he's doing. Especially San Francisco, they're going to dial up some plays. Kyle Shanahan knows what he's doing with that run game. And my prediction is going to be Kyle Shanahan and the Niners. I think they're going to find a good scheme. They're going to be able to run the ball relatively easily in Dallas. I think Mike McCarthy's not going to be ready for it. And I think this is going to be another one of them years where we get all hyped up for Dallas to make a big run, and it just doesn't happen. They've had too many games where they don't get the job done, in my opinion, like that tough loss versus the Cardinals later on in the season, and that game versus the Broncos really stands out to me just because of how bad it was, how bad of a loss it ended up being. I think the Niners just run the ball, and I think their defense is good enough to hold Dak, as we've seen he's struggled slightly against top defenses. Final score, San Francisco 24, Dallas 21.